Hi, welcome back. My name is Brittany, and this is my May wrap-up. I got through 6 books in the month of May, and it was actually an even split. I did 3 audio and 3 physical books. So this is about half of what I've been reading, and that's because I had a nice long vacation, and we went to some music, and it was very hard to read and listen to music. So a little bit of a slower month. Overall, it was a very interesting month. I feel like I was up and down and then up and down with what I was reading. So I have some mixed thoughts. I have some interesting feelings and opinions about what I read. But let's just dive right into it. The first book I finished is Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. This was so kindly lended to me by my friend. So I am happy to have finished actually 2 friend books to give back. Look at me go. I still have 7 more to go, but we're getting there. And this is a really interesting story. It starts off with a house fire, and one person at the top of the stairs has shot another. The house is burning down, and we have a third person who is watching this happen, and that third person is our main character. They remain unnamed for quite some time, and we get basically a very disjointed timeline on how we get to this final standoff. This is my first Chuck Palahniuk book, and he's fiction, he does satire, so it is a little wacky. It's pretty crazy and out there. I did really like the writing style as far as how the story was structured. So it opens up second chapter, it tells you, don't expect this to be the kind of story that goes and then, and then, and then. What happens here will have more of that fashion magazine feel, a Vogue or Glamour magazine chaos with page numbers on every second or fifth or third page, perfume cards falling out, and full-page naked women coming up out of nowhere to sell you makeup. Don't look for the contents page, buried magazine style, 20 pages back from the front. Don't expect to find anything right off. There isn't a real pattern to anything either. Stories will start, and then 3 paragraphs later, jump to page whatever, then jump back. This sets you up for a very boom, 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 insane timeline. And you do eventually get to the end and get back to this house fire knowing what is happening. Our main character has suffered a disfiguring injury to her face, and during her recovery she meets a woman named Brandy Alexander, and the two of them set off on an adventure. This book was really fascinating because at times I enjoyed it. I'm like, wow, what a trip, what is happening, you're kind of just hanging on for dear life is what it felt like. It was surprisingly graphic in its sexual content. It is very homophobic and transphobic at times. There's pill addictions in here, there's very complicated relationships, there is sexual abuse of a minor, there is so many things that go into the story, along with a very disjointed timeline and just overall insanity, that I found it hard to follow. I was following the storyline, and I was like, okay, I see what's happening, but I was maybe just so shocked most of the time, I couldn't really get behind it, and I know I missed some really nice quotes because I just was like, what am I reading? I would say the big themes identity and beauty is huge in this book. And then also self-sabotage is really huge. And our characters do things that I just didn't understand. It's explained to us, but even still I was like, wow, okay. This is definitely a weird book, and I think that's all I'm gonna say. I wouldn't say I loved my reading experience, but I also didn't hate it enough to never pick up a Chuck Palahniuk book again. I'm excited and curious to see. I do have Fight Club, so I will be checking out another book by him. I don't know, I've never really read satire before. It's a different type of weird than the other weird books I've read so far and enjoyed. So, I don't know, I just kind of have jumbled mixed thoughts. Overall, it was an interesting read. It was kind of a trip. If it sounds remotely interesting, even knowing potentially some of the content in there, still check it out because, I don't know, I would hate for you to miss out on a book that would be right for you. So, Invisible Monsters, I would give it a 3. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. At times, I didn't guess the ending. I did not even remotely guess how this was going to shape up. But, yeah, it was a time. It was a time. The other friend book I finished is Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck, and this is a debut novel, and it's a love story. So this opens up with Lewis and Ren. They meet in their 30s, they get married, and they're excited to start this new life together. Unfortunately, Lewis starts having some really concerning physical symptoms, and he gets diagnosed with a fatal condition where he is going to start slowly transforming into a shark. And at first, this is not a shifter romance by any means. They exist in our world, but instead of receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis or other, life-altering, debilitating terminal illness, people will just have a genetic mutation and they just start transforming into various animals. The world has different centers set up for this, and unfortunately turning into a shark is one of the more dangerous ones. Lewis experiences rage and hunger, and at some point he can't really be on land anymore. So we get to see how Lewis and Ren navigate this new diagnosis individually and together as a married couple. We also get a lot of backstory from Ren's childhood and her mother, because this diagnosis of her husband turning into a shark is not her first experience with a loved one going under a change. And that really does affect how she's handling this now. And it is a very beautifully written story. I really loved Lewis and Ren's relationship. They are so sweet. I loved learning about her mother and how that plays into this. I can't imagine what turning into an animal would be like, but I feel like Emily Haybeck did a really great job just giving this very descriptive, difficult process. I feel like when you read this book, you could almost substitute cancer for Lewis turning into a shark. That's how serious in tone it is. It is not a lighthearted, silly romance where he turns into a shark and then they still live happily ever after. It does not have a happy ending, but I would say it's still hopeful. Still a really great story. I definitely want to check out Emily Haybeck in the future just to see what else she comes up with, because like I said, things were written so beautifully. And I also just really liked how she structured her story, the actual writing and how things looked on the pages. So some pages are really short, like these two right here. And then others are broken up as a play. So Lewis is he was into theater before he had met Ren. He was into theater. He lived in New York. He really wanted to be an actor. He is now a high school theater teacher. And so some of his chapters are written like a play. So it has Lewis, Ren, what they're saying, and their actions are in italics. It's just a very unique way to write it while also incorporating his love of theater. And I just thought that was really sweet. Just a nice nod to Lewis and his love of theater. But yeah, it was a really, really good book, and I highly recommend. The next book I finished was an audiobook, and it was Butcher and Blackbird, part of the Ruinous Love trilogy by Bryn Weaver, narrated by Joe Arden and Lucy Rivers. This is your basic, silly, ridiculous, fun, entertaining rom-com with Sloane and Rowan. But just a slight twist is that they're serial killers. It is about as ridiculous as it sounds. I still really enjoyed this. So Sloane and Rowan meet kind of in unfortunate circumstances, and from this they're both kind of excited in a way to ooh, another killer. So a friendly competition ensues, and basically another bad guy is chosen. They're hosting this competition, whoever can kill the bad guy first wins. And from this competition, a friendship and a romance emerges. The romance itself was kind of fun. The sexy scenes were fun too. A little couple chili peppers. Their voices, I thought, worked really well together. And I don't know, I'm very particular about my voices, but Joe Arden had a very nice voice. It was very nice. Yeah, it's silly. It was fun. It was entertaining. I didn't really think too hard about it. I will be continuing this series as just an audio book to have on deck. There's 2 more books. The second one is out, and the third one does not have a release date yet. But I believe we're going to follow some people we met in the first book, which is kind of what we're seeing in other contemporary romances right now, where you have a world and you follow different couples within it. So I think that's what's going to happen next. I thought the third act conflict, the last fight that our main characters have before they make up again, I thought was pretty legit. Sometimes in romances, that third act conflict can be a little silly. You're like, oh my gosh, if you just took 2 seconds to talk to each other, you guys would be fine. But instead, we're not talking. That's great. But because they are serial killers, I would say just like safety and danger, like those things are a little bit more important for them. So I did like the third act conflict. I thought it was reasonable. I also just think it's really funny, like Salone and Rowan, like their friend groups both know they kill people, which I like love to support my friends, but like don't know if I could do that. It just was funny though, and like so silly because Salone is like busy with someone and her friend's like, oh my god, hey girl, like they're on the phone and you know she's like, hey, what's up? And like, oh, you busy? She's like, yeah, like what do you want? And her girlfriend's like, oh, like slay, get it. Like, pretty sure to have to call the police on you if I know you're killing someone, but whatever. I don't know. It just was like a Dexter moment, really, like the show Dexter, where you have like a vigilante killer. But there are some, I'd say, content that could be disturbing. I was not disturbed. I thought it was funny, but there is intentional cannibalism, accidental cannibalism. I mean, they are killing people, so it does get graphic and gory. There's a really weird scene with a corpse. Everyone's a little strange, but it was entertaining. It was fun. It is what it is. So if it sounds up your alley, check it out. The next audiobook I picked up was Mary by Nat Cassidy, narrated by Susan Bennett. This was a really fun book. I enjoyed this a lot, and I will definitely be checking out Nat Cassidy's other works. Where do we start? Where do we start with Mary? So Mary is a middle-aged woman who lives alone. She is recently fired from her job and now finds herself in need of new housing when her Aunt Nadine calls and is like, come take care of me, come move back home. So Mary moves back home, but while this is all happening, she is struggling with like debilitating nightmares. Like the same nightmare keeps repeating over and over again. She's having hot flashes, like she's having voices and just hearing these really dark things inside her mind. And anytime she looks in the mirror, she starts hallucinating and passes out. So she's struggling with this, and she keeps being written off as being menopausal. Like, you're fine, you're menopausal. She's like, okay, maybe, but like, I'm pretty sure you can still look in the mirror and you don't pass out. Like, something's wrong. She decides to start journaling while she is moving back home in order to help kind of make sense of this process, like what is happening, like kind of feeling crazy, what's going on. And she starts writing very strange things that she does not remember writing about. Throughout this transition, she's like, back home, she's taking care of her aunt. She discovers that her experiences are very similar to that of David Cross, who was a prolific, well-known serial killer back in the day. And then people start dying again. And it was such a trip. The twist and when things all come together was so fun. I did enjoy that. And just like overall, I really had a fun time with this book. Like a few things I think will kind of maybe heighten your enjoyment. The book opens up with a scene from the David Cross murders, and it's kind of like my favorite way. Horror movies do this a lot, where you're panning across this home, you know, the murder scene, you're seeing clips of the home, and you have a very upbeat song playing. I just love when scary movies do that because it's such a juxtaposition of like a really awful crime scene and like a happy song playing in the background. I feel like that makes it extra creepy. So that is how the book opens up. And the song is More Than Yesterday by Spiral Staircase. And just like when you start reading it, just like take a second, go listen to the song and then come back. And I just was like, oh my God, that's so creepy. I was like, oh geez. So I loved that. Another thing, the audiobook narrator, Susan Bennett, she did phenomenal as Mary, as the other characters, but specifically as Aunt Nadine. She was so vile. Like Aunt Nadine, like truthfully, if I had a family member like that, I would not take care of them. Like I would not help them. I would have shown up and been like, peace, I'm out. Because she is such a horrible woman. But by the end of it, like you kind of like her, but she's just so awful. Like she's so gravelly and she's just this like nasty human being. And Mary like takes care of her. She does what she has to do, but the voice actor really brought her to life. And it's so funny because Aunt Nadine has a dog named Chipotle. But her dog's name's Chipotle. But she calls her Chipotle. Like, just the stupidest shit. And it was so funny. Lastly, the prologue, more like the foreword to this book, not the prologue, the foreword, is written by Nat Cassidy. And I think it's worth a read or listen. And it's neat if you listen to the audiobook, he reads it to you himself, and then Susan Bennett takes over the story after that. And it just was a really cool treat from the author as to where the story came from and maybe some issues with it. So it is a very misogynistic story. And I'd say like misogynistic with a purpose, and he addresses that. He also just addresses the inspiration. This is very much like a nod to Carrie without powers. I mean, Mary is your average woman. She's not telekinetic, but I think you can just see the relationship with someone being like bullied and, you know, people are cruel to in school, and how that can shape out in adulthood. I overall really enjoyed it. Only critique is that it started to feel long at times. I feel like a few things could have just been maybe edited down a little, like, let's go. But overall, really enjoyed it. The horror elements, like all the spooky, creepy, evil, dark things that are happening, didn't bother me specifically. I would say what was the most disturbing was just like Mary's inner thoughts, because she starts having these really awful, violent inner monologues and visions of hurting other people. And like listening to that with like that in your ears was actually more disturbing for me personally than the other like horror things that were happening. Because that feels more realistic for me. Like just having like negativity like in your ears. I was like, ooh, Mary, like, girl, you are unwell. She's incredibly likable, just by all of that, and it was a fun time. I enjoyed it. The next book I finished was The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. This is narrated by Hilary Huber. This starts off with Caroline, who's our primary main character, and she and her adopted siblings were all raised and are now being trained by father in the way of the library. So they exist in our world, but I would say their immediate home feels very Twilight Zone-y. Maybe not sure like what's real, what's not real. There's definitely some magical, supernatural, like otherworldly things at play with these people. There's a group of kids that were abandoned, orphaned, so none of them are related, but they are all raised by father, and so they're all kind of siblings in a way. The library that father is like raising them in is not your traditional library that like you're probably picturing down the road. I can't even describe like what I pictured in my head. But anyways, there's this library, and they are each being trained in a certain catalog, and they cannot discuss catalogs with one another, but they each have like an area of expertise. So Caroline's is languages. One of them can enter the realm of the dead, talk to people. She gets resurrected, and then she can like die and come back multiple times. One of them can talk to animals, and David, his catalog is like strength. So he's really powerful in that regard. So the whole story is really like, what happened to father? Where is he? Because without him and his powers and like authority, there is room for like a new powerful figure to move in. This book was fairly disorienting for a while. You meet some characters, like, you know, other things get introduced, and you're like, what is going on? I will say you get answers. By the end of the book, you know what happened, you get explanations, and like it wraps up. It's not a book where you're left wondering what's going on. Like, you do get definite answers. This book was way darker than I was anticipating, and I feel like it's not something I'm seeing talked about a lot. Most of the reviews I've looked at are just like, wow, this is crazy, 5 out of 5 stars. This was frankly a 2-star book for me. I had a lot of problems with it. The content was not handled well, in my opinion, or in a way I enjoyed. David sexually assaults every female, like, sibling in this adopted family. Father himself is abusive physically, mentally, and just like flat out tortures these children and into young adulthood. And then the ending, like when we get the answers, I just really had a problem with it. I was not happy with the way that shook out. When I separate how I feel about the book, I think the idea as like a surface level was really fascinating, but I just did not like the execution at all. I do think it says something though about Scott Hawkins' writing, because I'm still like this fired up like a month out. But I can handle dark content. I can, like, there's sexual assault, physical assault, torture, animal death. I mean, there's death in general in this book. I just didn't like the way it was handled. If you want to know what I'm referring to specifically, I will link my Goodreads below. I added a specific review for this book talking about my problem with it. It's tagged as a spoiler review, so just know I'm going to spoil the ending of the book in that brief review. But I just wanted you to know, like, what you could be getting into. Well, I'm one person's opinion. A lot of people really love this, even with the ending, like, they acknowledge it. But for me, it just was like a hard no. Yeah, so that, I don't know. It is what it is. I can't rant anymore about this book. because I've been thinking about it for too long and I need to move on. The last book I finished was Motherhood by Sheila Heti. And this was a really interesting read. Like, what I was looking for in this book is not what I got, but I will say I am still satisfied with my reading experience. So this is like a memoir told in like journal entries almost. Over the course, I mean, it's just kind of like broken up into sections. Over the course of her life from 36 to 40, and she inevitably reaches this age that a lot of women, kind of reach, and it's like, okay, like, last hurrah, am I having kids, yes or no? She does contemplate motherhood for quite some time and gets a little baby obsessed. She does some life digging. She digs into her, like, soul, essentially, and does ultimately decide to be child-free. No matter what side of the fence you are on, I think you can find something interesting. I don't know, just a way to look at both sides of this, because really, like, you do start to spiral, and I appreciated how she also spiraled, because one day it'd be yes, one day it'd be no, and she's like, well, I don't know, like, do I have the right partner? Like, what am I gonna do with my job? Like, just all of these things that women think about are, like, here, and it was just very validating to like see that on paper. I really liked too, I just connected to Sheila as a person. She uses this thing called I Ching, and it is a divination system that originated in China over 3,000 years ago. Kings used it in time of war, and regular people used it to help them with real-life problems. By flipping 3 coins 6 times, one of 64 states is revealed and a text elaborates their meaning. So throughout the book, she flips coins to ask questions, and so many coins means yes, so many coins means no. She sees a palm reader, she has a tarot card reading, like she looks outwards to get the answers that really should come from within. And she addresses it, and you just get to see this like natural up and down of life. There were just so many things that I really enjoyed. It's also cool, like, so she incorporates like her tarot card readings, like there's a few pictures in here. It is very, like I said, journal style memoir, but she's also just like sometimes rambles at times just to like get your thoughts out. There was also a lot of really cool things where she brings up stuff at the beginning and ends with that as the book. I really liked how her theme was very like continuous. Like you realize why the book is called Motherhood, even though she decides to not have children. I loved just like the origin story for that. Oh God, just like the ending sentence is so good. In this book too, like I think when you like just naturally as a woman, when you start thinking about motherhood, you just naturally start thinking about your mom and your mom's mom or your grandma, and like that gets addressed in here. We do get to learn about Sheila's mom and her grandmother, and it ends up being very healing for Sheila and very enlightening, and just, I don't know, I just thought it was a really neat story. So this is like how when she's like flipping her coins, this is how it looks. Like she's asking a question, like yes, no, and sometimes it forces her to ask different questions in different ways as like an external tool to help internal self-reflection. But one thing I really enjoyed, so she is addressing these coins. Even if you said yes, it wouldn't matter. You don't mean anything to me. You don't know the future, you don't know my life, or what city I should be in, or what I should be doing, or if I should have a child with Miles or not. You are complete randomness without meaning, and you are not showing me the way. That can only be determined by minding my own heart and looking at the world around me, thinking deeper and more clearly, and not being so insecure that I should need you to tell me what's what. And yet you have shown me some good things. I just really liked so much about this. Even though I went in hoping for one thing, I feel like I came out with a different perspective and just a different appreciation, a different experience. And like, really that's like the point of books for me, is to like learn more and come out better on the other side. Also, like it addresses PMS, and I would say to a more extreme extent PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's a more heightened form of PMS where you almost feel bipolar throughout the month, like your highs are high but you are so low, like once you hit that luteal phase, and like you're not just PMSing, like you are a different person. And it really addresses all of this as she is in her late 30s trying to navigate this like big life question of motherhood. So really liked it. Sheila Heti also is the author of a new book, I think it's coming out, called The Alphabet Diaries, where she takes her journal entries and like each entry is going to be the start of an alphabetical letter. And so the story itself will be out of order, but I think it'll be really cool because I liked a lot of her writing in here and just how she structured it, what she did. the themes throughout. Yeah, it just was a really good read. So if this is a topic you're like, what the fuck about, check it out. Maybe it will give you something to work with as well. That is it, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out during this May wrap up. I don't know if you can hear the raindrops, but if you made it this far, leave me a little lightning strike or like a rain cloud, because it is raining out and it just sounds really nice. Or tell me your favorite book in May. Always adding to the TBR. You know this. Forever adding. So I hope you had a wonderful month, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!